Her name echoed across the loudspeaker, sharp and commanding, causing every cadet to halt and turn. Emily Harper was handed a sealed envelope and dismissed from the formation. No explanation, no justification, just the cold precision of rejection by the system. Laughter broke out somewhere behind her. A voice murmured, "Looks like the farmer's daughter couldn't keep up." Have you ever faced public humiliation that still clings to your memory? Drop your story in the comments because those moments never really fade. Emily didn't respond. She simply walked away. While the Academy deleted her name from records, one log quietly preserved it in the simulator database, and one aircraft in unlisted, untouched was already being readied by the only person who hadn't lost faith in her. She wasn't finished. Not even close. They wanted silence. What they were about to get was thunder. Emily Sparrow Harper stood alone on the airstrip, wind tugging at her short-cropped blonde hair as she watched the other cadets in formation. At 28, she was older than most recruits. Her piercing green eyes absorbed every detail, and her quiet presence had always made her a convenient target. Laughter drifted in on the wind from a nearby group of cadets from prestigious military lineages. Their evaluations were spotless. Too spotless. Captain Bradley Thornton approached, his perfectly sculpted face fixed in a look of professional remorse that didn't quite reach his steely blue eyes. "We've reviewed your performance profile," he said, his tone detached and clinical. "It doesn't meet the standard for tactical decision-making under pressure." Every word followed protocol, every word delivered with cold precision. But Emily could see the smug satisfaction he didn't bother hiding. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light across the hangars. Emily reached into her jacket, fingers brushing against a tarnished silver wing pin of the only keepsake from her father, lost in the crash 3 years ago. She ran her thumb over the smooth edges where his name had once been etched, now worn away by time. John Coleman Harper had been more than a crop duster. He was a legend in their community, revered for his unmatched flying skills and intuitive mechanical sense. Pilots would detour miles just to have him check their engines. "You've got the touch, Sparrow," he'd told her the first time she took the controls at age 12. "It's in your blood." The memory was both balm and blade. She'd promised him she'd fly out, really fly, not just dust fields. Now, that promise seemed broken, just another casualty in a system that favored legacy over talent. Lost in thought, she didn't notice Tech Sergeant Danny Brooks until his gravelly voice snapped her back. "Rough day, kid." The 40-something mechanic had grease-stained arms and kind, worn eyes. His hands told the story of decades spent elbow-deep in engines scarred, stained, and stained again. Unlike most at the Academy, Danny had always treated her with quiet respect. She'd spent hours in the maintenance hangar, finding solace in engines and schematics, earning a shred of admiration from the seasoned technician. "Just got booted," she said, voice steady from practice. "Apparently my tactical reflexes aren't up to par." The words tasted bitter, but she kept her expression neutral. Danny's jaw tightened. "Thornton's doing, I bet, same way your gyro just happened to recalibrate during yesterday's sim?" Emily's eyes snapped up. For weeks, her simulations had gone smoothly until critical evaluations, when strange malfunctions always seemed to arise. There had always been explanations to software updates, sensor glitches, calibration drifts. Always something, always timed perfectly to sabotage her. "Doesn't matter," she muttered, turning toward the exit. "I've got 48 hours to clear out." Danny stepped in her path, his gaze sharpened. "You're just going to leave? Let Thornton win?" Emily's jaw clenched. "I fought for everything here, Sergeant." It wasn't enough. Danny glanced around, then leaned in, his voice low. "What if I told you there's a way to show them exactly what they're throwing away?" There was something in his tone, an edge of defiance, a flicker of hope. Emily paused. "I'm listening," she said cautiously. Danny nodded toward the hangar. "Walk with me." As they crossed the airstrip, he spoke in hushed, urgent tones. "In 3 days, brass from DCR flying in. Big demonstration, our top pilots showing off their skills. Thornton's the main event. Naturally, he'll be taking up the new F-22 they just brought in." Emily's breath caught. The Raptor, the Air Force's most advanced fighter. Few pilots ever got near it. "What does that have to do with me?" she asked, though a dangerous idea had already started forming. Danny's eyes sparkled with a mix of mischief and conviction. "I've been watching you, Harper. You've got something those Silver Spoon flyboys couldn't touch with 10 years of training. It's in your instincts, the way you treat every machine like it's alive." He paused at the hangar entrance, turning to face her fully. "Your father and I served together for 8 years. I was there the day they buried him with lies. They called it pilot error, but I saw the flight deck and Thornton manipulated the system. Your dad took the fall to protect the brass." Emily flinched as Danny's eyes flicked to the faint glint of her father's pin tucked into her collar. "You've got 3 days," he said quietly. 3 days to prove what you are. I know how you can do idle, but it's dangerous. Could end my career, might do worse to yours." The simulator buzzed to life under her fingertips. It looked different from the Academy's models, but something about it already felt familiar, like the sky itself had been waiting for her return. Danny took up position near the hangar door, keeping watch. Emily lowered herself into the pilot's seat. Her pulse thundered in her ears, yet her hands were steady. The cool glow from the instrument panel bathed her features in blue, throwing sharp shadows across her focused face. She began the startup sequence with precision, her fingers moving fluidly over the controls. Everything responded to her touch like it remembered her, like she belonged here. "You've got 2 hours," Danny had told her. "Make them count." She closed her eyes briefly and let the hum of the simulator dissolve into a different sound, a wind whispering over golden wheat fields, and the creaking wings of an old biplane overhead. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Feel the aircraft, Sparrow. Don't fly idle, become it." The images surged back with vivid clarity. The old airstrip behind their farmhouse, the dusty yellow plane sitting in the sun, her small hands gripping the control stick for the first time. While other kids her age got dolls or bikes for their birthdays, her father gave her wings. That day, he'd hoisted her into the cockpit and said, "Time you learned the family business," with a knowing wink. What began as simple flight lessons evolved into something much deeper. By 16, she wasn't just flying, she was fixing engines by sound alone and guiding pilots through emergencies. There was Mr. Grayson, whose misfiring engine she diagnosed from the ground during planting season. She had him on the ground safely before anyone else even noticed the problem. Then there was the crop duster from the next county, panicked mid-flight when his controls locked up. Emily talked him through a textbook emergency landing, a one she had learned in a field, not a classroom. And the businessman whose sleek Cessna nearly cost him his life when the fuel system failed midair. Emily's improvised repair using spare tractor parts and baling wire had brought him down safely. He offered to pay for her future. She'd refused. Harper pride ran deeper than Harper talent. The Academy never recognized what she was. She'd won the Regional Agricultural Aviation Simulation Challenge 2 years in a row, beating veterans with decades of flight time. Her record-breaking score had left the judges speechless, but when she'd mentioned it during her interview, the instructor barely concealed his smirk. "Not official training," he said, brushing it off like it was nothing. What they didn't understand was that real flying couldn't always be measured. It lived in instinct, so how to feel a wind shift, how to coax a failing engine home, how to survive when everything fell apart. Now, with the simulator fully awake around her, Emily opened her eyes. The F-22's virtual cockpit was a maze of technology, far beyond her father's rickety old plane, but flying was still flying. The core of it hadn't changed. She let her fingers move slowly over the controls, learning their weight, their shape, their purpose. The throttle was heavier, the response sharper, but beneath all the sophistication, there was something familiar, an aircraft ready to dance with a partner who could keep up. Danny had stolen the access codes from the instructor's database, a reckless, career-ending move, but he didn't hesitate. "Some things matter more than rules," he told her. "Justice. Your father would have done the same for me." The module he loaded wasn't for beginners. It was the Advanced Combat Program, the kind of simulation reserved for top cadets nearing graduation. If she could master it on her own terms, in her own way, they'd have no choice but to see her for what she truly was. Not just a trainee, not just a farm girl, a pilot. She could fly anything. For the next couple of hours, Emily lost herself in the virtual sky. At first, the experience overwhelmed her. The F-22 responded with a brutal precision that her muscle memory, trained on older, simpler aircraft, wasn't ready for. She crashed during tight turns, lost control in high-speed climbs, and saw the simulator screen flare red with failure warnings. But each time, she adjusted, improved, adapted. Her hands grew steadier, more precise, her movements more deliberate. The instincts built through years of unsupervised flights over Kansas fields began to surface, not from formal lessons, but from raw, lived experience. By the fourth try, she was completing missions. By the sixth, she was outperforming the benchmarks that top-tier cadets struggled with. The Academy had dismissed her flying as unrefined, even dangerous, but they hadn't realized that what they were sneering at was the mark of a true pilot. During one mission, when the F-22 simulator suffered a catastrophic hydraulic failure at supersonic speed, Emily responded instantly. She didn't flinch. Her fingers danced across the console, making rapid adjustments that not only stabilized the aircraft but kept her on target. When Danny returned, his voice was low and urgent. "Security's making rounds. We have to go." Emily nodded, reluctantly powering down the simulator. He glanced at the data feed still scrolling across the screen of 3 successful combat runs, each one exceeding Academy performance thresholds. His eyes gleamed with pride. "I told you," he said softly, "you've got the touch, just like your father." There was a pause before he added, "John could feel an aircraft's limits better than any pilot I ever met." Before Thornton grounded him permanently, Emily's voice was tight. "You knew him that well. Why didn't you ever say anything?" Danny's smile faded. "Because watching your friend's name get dragged through the mud does something to a man. I tried to fight it, but Thornton had the right connections. The system closed ranks. I couldn't break through. But seeing you fly tonight a broken bar, it feels like a second shot at the truth." Before she could respond, footsteps echoed outside the hangar. Danny stiffened. "We've got to move," he whispered. He guided her through a side door into the night. They slipped out just as a security patrol passed the entrance. That's when Emily saw a camera in the corner of the hangar, its red light blinking steadily. Danny cursed under his breath. Someone's going to see that footage. A cold knot formed in her chest. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Danny didn't look defeated. His eyes sharpened. "Now a broken bar, we accelerate the plan. Someone saw what you did." The question, "I saw who? And what are they going to do about it?" The next morning, Emily was woken by a firm knock at her dormitory door. She threw on a t-shirt and sweatpants, blinking away sleep. When she opened the door, Lieutenant Mia Alvarez stood in the hallway. Alvarez's dark eyes were unreadable, her stance rigid with authority. One of the Academy's few female instructors, she was known for her ironclad discipline, and she also happened to be head of security. "Harper," she said crisply, "get dressed. Meet me at Hangar 6 in 15 minutes. Don't talk to anyone." Before Emily could speak, Alvarez turned on her heel and walked away, leaving her stunned in the doorway. This was it. They'd seen the footage. Emily got dressed in record time, heart pounding. Her mind raced with possibilities, and none of them good. If she was lucky, they'd just throw her off the base quietly. If she wasn't, there could be formal charges. Worse, Danny might be implicated. The thought twisted in her gut. Crossing the Academy grounds toward Hangar 6, she kept her head down, ignoring the sideways glances of passing cadets. Rumors were spreading already. The hangar was small, mostly used for storage. The air smelled faintly of fuel and oil, a scent she'd always associated with home. Inside, Lieutenant Alvarez stood beside a tarp-covered object. Emily's stomach dropped. It was the simulator. Alvarez's expression was unreadable. "Close the door," she said. Emily obeyed, standing at attention. But instead of launching into a lecture, Alvarez walked to a control panel and keyed in a sequence. A soft beep echoed as the security cameras powered down. "We've got 7 minutes before the system resets," Alvarez said, turning back to her. "That should be enough time for you to explain why you were in a restricted simulator, a broken bar, and how your performance broke 3 Academy records." Emily froze. This wasn't an accusation, it was something else. Alvarez had seen the footage. Alvarez nodded, a flicker of impatience crossing her face. I monitor all security alerts personally. So imagine my surprise when I saw a subpar cadet who'd just been dismissed executing complex combat scenarios better than most of our graduates. She crossed her arms. I'll ask one more time. Explain. Emily hesitated. Lying was pointless if the proof was right there beside them, but telling the truth could cost Danny everything. As if reading her thoughts, Alvarez added, and before you try to cover for Brooks, don't bother. I know he helped you. What I want to know is why. Emily took a steadying breath and made her choice. Because Captain Thornton's evaluation of me was wrong, she said, meeting Alvarez's gaze. I've been flying since I was 12. My father was John Harper, a military pilot before he was grounded. He taught me everything. Her voice grew stronger, the frustration of months boiling to the surface. From the beginning, my evaluations were sabotaged, faulty equipment, calibration issues, always something, and somehow, always overlooked. I used the simulator because I needed to know a proof that I belong here. The words tumbled out in the rush. Sergeant Brooks just gave me the opportunity. That's all. Alvarez's expression didn't shift, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, or maybe understanding. Rumors of her own fights with the old guard weren't new to anyone at the academy. That's a serious accusation, she said at last. Tampering with evaluation systems is a court-martial offense. Emily squared her shoulders. I know, and I stand by every word. Alvarez was silent for a long moment. Then she glanced at her watch. 3 minutes, she murmured. So Broken Bar, what was the plan? Break in, prove you can fly, and hope someone notices? You're already dismissed. Emily looked down, the surge of defiance fading. I didn't have a plan. I just a broken bar I couldn't leave without trying. To her surprise, Alvarez's stern features softened slightly. No, she said. It wasn't stupid. Reckless, yes, but not stupid. She turned and pulled back the tarp covering the simulator, revealing the sleek frame beneath. You know what this machine is scheduled for, don't you? Emily nodded. Danny had mentioned the upcoming demonstration. The Pentagon brass arrives Friday, Alvarez said slowly. Thornton's big moment. She paused, then added, what if, instead of leaving quietly a broken bar, you showed them exactly what kind of pilot he's trying to kick out? The soft hum of electronics signaled the security system powering back on. Alvarez stepped back, her tone shifting back to formal. You're restricted to base until your discharge is processed, Harper, she said loudly, projecting for any active surveillance mix. You'll follow all regulations until then. At the door, she stopped. Oh, and Walsh uses access code 472 ALMA for his sessions. He's not exactly careful about logging out. And then she was gone, leaving Emily alone with 1,000 new possibilities spinning in her mind. That night, as she slipped into the simulator using Walsh's login, a figure emerged from the shadows. Ethan Walsh. Emily tensed, but he made no move to stop her. Figured I'd find you here, he said quietly. She braced herself. You going to report me? Walsh raised a small recorder and switched it off. Thornton told me to keep an eye on you. Record anything suspicious. Boot to Broken Bar, he shrugged. Last week I saw you fix a lateral stability fault in the Mark V sim that 3 instructors couldn't figure out. Then suddenly you're failing evaluations on basic flight theory? It doesn't add up. He stepped closer, eyes scanning the screen showing her simulation scores. That inverted descent maneuver? I've been trying to nail that for weeks. Thornton says it's key for Friday's demo, and you pulled it off like it was nothing. For the next hour, they trained together, Emily walking him through the complex sequence. As they worked, Walsh began to open up. I've seen him, he admitted. Thornton, altering your scores. Then, the bombshell. The aircraft for Friday's demo is the FX-97. Call sign, Coleman. Emily froze. That was her father's call sign. Thornton requested it specifically, Walsh said, his voice low. Said something about poetic justice, about closing a circle. When the session ended, Walsh looked at her with something new in his expression, respect. I don't know what Thornton sees when he looks at you, he said, powering down the system, but I see a pilot who belongs. The next 48 hours blurred the late-night simulations, whispered plans, Hushed meetings in quiet corners of the base. Emily, Alvarez, Danny, Walsh, an unlikely team, a final chance, and a reckoning long overdue. Each of them brought their unique skills and knowledge to the quickly formed plan. By day, Emily kept up the fight till the Section 8 of preparing to leave the base, packing her few belongings, completing discharge paperwork, and wearing a resignation that fooled everyone except the most attentive. But by night, she became the pilot she was born to be, spending hours in the simulator under Walsh's access code, mastering the F-22's complex systems and pushing its virtual limits. "You're a natural," Danny remarked during one session, his gruff voice softening with a hint of paternal pride. "Just like your old man." Lieutenant Alvarez proved to be a skilled strategist, using her position as head of security to quietly monitor Thornton's movements and communications. It was Alvarez who uncovered that the captain had scheduled a private inspection of the FX-97 at the Kilimani the night before the Pentagon demonstration. "He's going to do a final systems check," she reported during a meeting in a seldom-used storage facility. "Standard procedure, but it gives him plenty of time to make any last-minute adjustments to make sure the aircraft performs exactly how he wants." The weight of that possibility hung heavy in the air. If Thornton had manipulated evaluation systems to keep Emily out of the program, what might he do to guarantee his own success during the highest-profile flight of his career? "You think he'd tamper with the aircraft?" Walsh asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper despite their privacy. He had been the most hesitant member of their group at first, years of loyalty to Thornton battling with his growing doubts, but every new revelation about Thornton's ethical compromises strengthened Walsh's resolve. "Not directly," Danny answered, his eyes darkening with the hard-earned knowledge of military politics. "He's too smart for outright sabotage, but he might make subtle tweaks adjusting responsiveness, control surfaces, and nothing obvious enough to call sabotage, but enough to give him an edge in the demonstration." Emily frowned, considering the implications. Could those tweaks be turned against him? She asked, an idea beginning to take shape. Danny's slow smile said it all. Their plan was daring and precise, demanding perfect timing and execution. Alvarez ensured Emily retained access to the base despite her pending discharge. Walsh became their eyes and ears inside Thornton's inner circle. Danny's role, as chief maintenance technician, was the most critical and the riskiest. "I can't stop him from making his adjustments," Danny explained, "but I can document every change. More importantly, I can make sure those adjustments aren't as effective as he thinks." The risk was immense. If caught, Danny faced not only dismissal but potential criminal charges. Yet the old mechanic seemed almost eager for the challenge. "Some things are worth the risk," he said when Emily voiced her worries. "Your father would have done the same for me." Getting Emily from the barracks to the aircraft meant navigating multiple security checkpoints. "This will get you past level 2, Alvarez said, handing her a forged security badge. "After that, you're on your own." Walsh supplied a maintenance schedule that revealed a gap in hangar surveillance. "See if from 13:45 to 14:05, a narrow window for their move." "There's one problem," Walsh warned. "You'll have to cross the main terminal corridor during shift change. If anyone spots you, well, you won't have an explanation." The meaning was clear. Emily would be deep in restricted territory, alone, with no cover. The night before the demonstration, their plan went into motion. "Thornton's more agitated than usual," Walsh reported, snapping at cadets, obsessively reviewing flight patterns for the 100th time. "I've never seen him like this." Emily understood the pressure all too well. The Pentagon officials weren't just judging the aircraft, they were sizing up the future leaders of the Air Force's elite training programs. For Thornton, the stakes were as high as they could get, making him both dangerously predictable and unpredictable. As darkness cloaked the base, Emily slipped quietly to a predetermined observation point near the maintenance hangar, where she could watch Thornton's inspection without being detected. What she saw over the next 2 hours confirmed their fears. Thornton moved deliberately around the aircraft, occasionally consulting Danny or scrolling through a tablet. At several points, he ordered subtle adjustments, and not dramatic, but enough to tailor the aircraft's performance to his precise preferences. Midway through the inspection, Danny's grip tightened on his. Suddenly, Danny's face twisted in pain. clutching his side. "Old injury," he gasped to Thornton. "Need a minute." The distraction gave Danny precious moments alone with the aircraft's diagnostic system, just enough time to document Thornton's changes and quietly implement subtle countermeasures. When Thornton finally left, satisfied with his work, Emily stayed hidden until Danny emerged from the hangar alone. Instead of approaching her directly, the mechanic put on a show, locking up the facility and heading toward his quarters. Only when he passed close to Emily's hiding spot did he discreetly drop a small object that caught the moonlight, a data drive containing all the documentation of Thornton's optimizations. What Emily didn't know was that at that very moment, Thornton was watching security footage in his office, a glass of expensive whiskey in hand, his face troubled. Despite their careful precautions, something had triggered his suspicion, maybe a pattern in Walsh's movements or a discrepancy in the base's security logs. The captain rewound the footage, eyes narrowed as he searched for proof of the nagging unease that had been growing inside him for days. Then he caught it, a fleeting glimpse of Emily entering a restricted area during hours when she should have been confined to her quarters. His handsome face hardened into a mask of cold fury. "Not this time, Harper," he muttered, reaching for his phone. "Not on my watch." The day of the demonstration dawned clear and bright, a perfect flying weather. Emily woke before sunrise, mentally rehearsing their plan one last time. The window of opportunity was razor thin, barely 3 minutes to move from the maintenance access point to the runway without detection. Their entire scheme depended on flawless timing and the assumption that Thornton, confident in his control, wouldn't suspect their move until it was too late. Thanks to Danny's detailed records, they knew exactly what tweaks Thornton had made to the FX-97A, subtle adjustments to throttle response and control surfaces designed to give him an edge during complex maneuvers. What Thornton didn't realize was that Danny had installed countermeasures to restore the aircraft's factory settings in ways impossible to detect during pre-flight checks. At noon, Emily met with her co-conspirators at their unofficial headquarters. Danny looked exhausted but resolute, dark circles under his eyes from a night spent carefully calibrating sensors to mask his modifications. "The Coleman is ready," he announced, using her father's call sign with quiet reverence. "Thornton completed his pre-flight check an hour ago. Everything's exactly as it should be, which means nothing's as he expects it to be." Lieutenant Alvarez frowned as she glanced at her watch. "There's a problem. The security rotation changed. I'm assigned to the VIP section now. I won't be able to clear your path like we planned." She handed Emily a security badge bearing her photo but a different name. "This will get you past level 2. After that, you're on your own." Danny pulled Emily aside and pressed something small and metallic into her palm. "Your father would want you to have this today," he said gruffly. Emily opened her hand to reveal a gleaming set of pilot's wings, and not the worn pen she had carried for years, but an official insignia inscribed with John Coleman Harper's name and service number. "He earned these," Danny said, his voice thick with emotion. "They kept them even after everything. Found them in his personal effects after the crash." Emily closed her fingers around the wings, struggling to speak. This was more than a keepsake, it was a tangible link to her father's honor, a reminder of what was stolen from him and what she was determined to reclaim. At 1400 hours, Thornton and his team took to the sky. Emily watched as the sleek F-22s roared down the runway and climbed into the flawless blue above. Even from a distance, she recognized the Coleman by its distinctive markings as her father's aircraft, now flown by the man who had destroyed his career. For 15 minutes, she observed Thornton lead his team through masterful maneuvers, showcasing the Raptor's capabilities. Whatever else Thornton might be, he was undeniably skilled, but skill without integrity was like a plane without the soul, technically perfect, yet lacking the human spark that turned flying into something extraordinary. At 14:04, Emily's comm unit crackled. Walsh's voice crackled through Emily's comm unit. "He's setting up for the inverted descent now. Stand by." Emily's heart raced as she watched Thornton's aircraft to her father's plane climb steadily to the altitude needed for the maneuver. This was it, the moment everything depended on, the narrow window that would either open or close forever in the next 60 seconds. Then Walsh's voice came again. "Maintenance alert triggered. You have approximately 2 minutes." Emily moved swiftly through the maintenance corridor but froze when a security officer rounded the corner, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm, eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Ma'am, this area is restricted during demonstrations," he called out. Without missing a beat, Emily knelt beside an exposed junction box. "Signal calibration check," she said, gesturing toward the tangled wires. "Towers are getting interference from the east sector." She pulled a multimeter from her pocket, a detail Danny had insisted on to sell the act. The technical jargon, combined with her confident tone, worked. The officer nodded and moved on. Heart pounding, Emily resumed her path toward the runway, where the standby Raptor waited. Approaching the cockpit, she felt a sudden moment of clarity, a certainty that transcended fear or doubt. This was what she was born to do. Her hands moved over the controls with practiced precision, bringing the sophisticated jet to life. "Tower, this is FX-93 requesting emergency takeoff clearance," Emily transmitted. A confused voice responded, "FX-93, there's no scheduled emergency takeoff. Please identify pilot and authorization code." "Tower, this is Emily Harper, call sign Sparrow, authorization code Coleman 739er, security protocol override," she replied. Static crackled across the radio, followed by a suspicious voice, "FX-93, stand by for verification." Emily's stomach sank. This wasn't part of the plan. The override should have worked automatically. Just as she prepared to abort, a burst of electronic interference hit the tower's communications system, Danny's final safeguard. When the system reset, only the automated protocols remained active. "FX-93, you are cleared for emergency takeoff on runway 3, came the computerized response. Emily advanced the throttle, feeling the Raptor's immense power surge through the airframe. The force pressed her back into her seat as the aircraft lifted off, climbing rapidly into the sky that had called to her since childhood. Far above, Thornton was finishing the inverted descent, the highlight of his demonstration. Through her radio, Emily heard the control tower's appreciative murmurs as they tracked his flawless execution. What they couldn't see, and only Danny knew for certain, was that the Coleman was responding differently than Thornton expected. The subtle changes Danny had made forced the captain to compensate constantly, stretching his skill to maintain the illusion of effortless control. At that precise moment, as Thornton leveled out from the maneuver, Emily's aircraft appeared on his radar. "Tower, I'm picking up an unscheduled aircraft in demonstration airspace," came Thornton's sharp voice over the comm. "Please confirm and advise." The confusion that followed was exactly what they had counted on. Controllers scrambled to identify the intruder while Thornton's team reacted to the unexpected development. Seizing her moment with fluid grace, Emily maneuvered her Raptor into formation, positioning herself directly alongside the Coleman. Through the canopies of their aircraft, separated by mere meters, Emily and Thornton locked eyes for a brief, electric moment. She saw instant recognition flash across his face, followed by disbelief and then fury. His lips moved in what she imagined was a curse, but the roar of engines drowned out the sound. In response, Emily tapped the pilot wings proudly displayed on her flight suit and gave Thornton a small, knowing smile. What happened next unfolded with the inevitability of fate. Enraged by Emily's intrusion and destabilized by his aircraft's unexpected response, Thornton attempted an aggressive maneuver to regain control, but the Coleman, restored to factory settings by Danny's careful work, it didn't respond as Thornton anticipated. A slight overcorrection sent the F-22 into the beginning of a spin, not catastrophic, but definitely not part of the planned demonstration. Emily felt the gravitational forces tugging at her body as she watched the Coleman begin its uncontrolled rotation, fully aware of the disorientation Thornton must be feeling as the horizon spun sickeningly around him. For a moment, she hesitated. The man had systematically. Emily hesitated for a moment. The man who had destroyed her career was also the one responsible for her father's downfall. Justice demanded she let him fail spectacularly, in front of Pentagon officials and his own superiors. But more than vengeance guided her hands. Calmly, she keyed her radio. "Coleman, reduce throttle to 40% and ease your stick to a degrees port," she instructed with precision, issuing the exact correction needed to counter the spin. "You're fighting factory settings. not your modifications. There was a tense silence. Thornton struggled both with his aircraft and his pride before Emily saw the Coleman begin to stabilize. Even now, I won't let your ego kill you, she murmured softly. Breaking formation, she executed a flawless roll, positioning her aircraft above Thornton's, clearly visible to the observers below. Then, with the exacting precision her father had drilled into her from her very first flight, she demonstrated the proper recovery technique. Her Raptor flowed through the exact sequence of maneuvers Thornton had been fighting to perform. Sweat beaded on Emily's forehead as she pulled through a high G-turn, the pressure forcing blood from her head and darkening the edges of her vision. The vibration of the airframe, the resistance of the control stick, the roar of the engines, all were infinitely more vivid than any simulation. This was real flying, real consequences. And the exhilaration surged through her veins like pure electricity. Tower, this is FX-93, Emily transmitted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Captain Thornton appears to be experiencing control issues with the Coleman, requesting permission to complete the demonstration sequence while he recovers. A long pause followed, long enough for Emily to wonder if she had miscalculated, if her gamble would end with military police waiting the moment she landed. Then, to her astonishment, a new voice came over the comm, deep, authoritative, and unmistakably amused. This is General Michaels, Pentagon Oversight Committee. Permission granted. FX-93. Let's see what you can do. A surge of elation flooded Emily as she acknowledged the transmission. This was it, her one chance to prove to the world and to herself exactly what John Harper's daughter was capable of. For the next 10 minutes, Emily pushed the Raptor through maneuvers that combined textbook precision with the intuitive flair she'd developed from years of unauthorized flying. Below, the assembled dignitaries and base personnel watched in amazement as an unscheduled pilot effortlessly outperformed the Academy's star instructor. Throughout, Emily maintained perfect awareness of Thornton's position, noting with grim satisfaction that while he had stabilized the Coleman, he made no attempt to interfere with her impromptu display. As she completed the final, technically challenging sequence flawlessly, Emily keyed her radio again. This is Emily Harper, call sign Sparrow, requesting landing clearance. And if it pleases the tower, I'd like to dedicate this flight to my father John Coleman Harper, the finest pilot I've ever known. Her request was met with stunned silence before General Michaels's voice returned over the comm. Landing clearance granted, Sparrow. The tower acknowledges your dedication. As Emily guided her aircraft gracefully back toward the runway, she felt a weight lift of the years of suppressed grief and frustrated ambition releasing their hold on her heart. Whatever happened next, a court-martial, disgrace, or vindication, she had honored her father in the sky they both loved. The Raptor responded to her touch like an extension of her own body, descending with flawless precision toward the waiting ground. What Emily didn't know or couldn't know was that Danny Brooks had one final card left to play, evidence that would transform Emily's act of defiance into something far greater than personal redemption. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of testimony and evidence in the base's briefing room. General Michaels and senior officers reviewed Danny's footage, which showed Thornton making unauthorized adjustments to the Coleman, alterations designed to give him an advantage but that potentially compromised safety. When confronted, Thornton's arrogance finally cracked. The modifications were minor, he insisted. Standard practice for experienced pilots. His excuse fell flat when Walsh contradicted him, revealing how Thornton had systematically falsified Emily's evaluations. He told me it was necessary to maintain standards, Walsh admitted, unable to meet Emily's eyes. Said that letting someone like Harper succeed would undermine the program's prestige. Lieutenant Alvarez corroborated Walsh's account. There appears to be a pattern, sir, Alvarez reported, placing a data tablet before the general. Over the past 5 years, 28 candidates without family connections have had their scores manipulated. Emily Harper isn't an isolated case, she's just the first who fought back effectively. Danny's final revelation shattered the last of Thornton's dignity. The incident that ended John Harper's flying career, the accident officially attributed to pilot error, had another story behind it. Captain Thornton had been the test engineer who signed off on the aircraft systems before that flight. Danny produced a faded incident report. The official record showed a control system failure that Harper supposedly should have anticipated. What it didn't show was that Thornton had modified those same systems of modifications that virtually identical to what he did to the Coleman yesterday. Is this true, Captain? General Michaels asked quietly. Thornton's silence spoke volumes. The general then turned to Emily. Ms. Harper, while your methods today were unorthodox, you have exposed a serious breach of ethics within our training program. Your father was an exceptional pilot whose career was cut short by circumstances that now demand further investigation. Captain Thornton was immediately relieved of command. His demonstration was officially marked as compromised due to equipment irregularities, while Emily's flight was recorded as an unauthorized but technically flawless display. General Michaels ordered a full review of all cadet evaluations from the past 5 years, appointing Walsh to the Oversight Committee, a move toward ensuring fairness for future candidates. Most importantly, the general personally rescinded Emily's dismissal, reinstating her on a probationary period under Lieutenant Alvarez's supervision. From his breast pocket, General Michaels withdrew a small velvet box. John Coleman Harper was posthumously exonerated last year, he said. The evidence was strong enough to warrant a formal apology and restoration of his service record. He opened the box, revealing a Distinguished Service Medal. This belongs to your family. I had planned to mail it, but it seems fitting to present it in person. Emily accepted the medal with trembling hands, tears blurring her vision. He never talked much about his military service, she whispered. I think it hurt too much knowing people believed he'd failed. General Michaels nodded. These wings weren't clipped by failure, they were buried by silence. You made them fly again. 6 months later, Emily stood on the same tarmac where her journey had almost ended. The morning sun painted the sky gold and pink as F-22s taxied toward the runway. At her side stood Danny, his face creased with a proud smile. Emily touched the lieutenant's bars on her uniform, a commission earned by completing her probationary period with distinction. The investigation into Thornton's conduct had shaken the entire Air Force training system, exposing systemic biases that had persisted for decades. Thornton himself had been dishonorably discharged under General Michaels's supervision. The Academy had implemented new, transparent evaluation protocols designed to identify talent regardless of background. Later that afternoon, as Emily guided the Coleman through the sky, executing intricate patterns with fluid precision, she felt her father's presence strongly. The silver wings gleamed on her chest as she showcased both the aircraft's capabilities and her own extraordinary skill. G-forces pressed her into the seat as she entered a tight turn, sweat beading on her brow despite the climate-controlled cockpit. The physical sensations anchored her in the moment. This was real, earned through struggle and vindication. Far below, officials watched in admiration, captivated by the perfect harmony of pilot and machine. But Emily's thoughts were elsewhere, on golden wheat fields, a rickety old biplane, and her father's patient voice, "Feel the aircraft, Sparrow. Don't just fly, it'll become it." As she completed her demonstration and brought the Raptor into a graceful descent, Emily whispered, "This is for you, Dad." The Coleman seemed to respond, as if it understood, recognizing the rightness of a Harper at its controls. When her wheels touched down with characteristic perfection, Emily knew she had found her place in the world, and not just as John Harper's daughter, but as a pilot whose skills had earned her the right to touch the sky on her own terms. The journey had been filled with obstacles that might have broken a lesser spirit, but as her father taught her, no one can clip your wings if you believe in your own strength. You've just experienced another crazy moment with Yaw Stories. Subscribe now and dive into even more chaos, laughs, and jaw-dropping tales.